talking head and skin. If we're behind, then never mind.
Read or not to read? That is the question. The question that we will be asking ourselves all season long up until Harley Reid puts pen to paper either for West Coast or confirms he's going elsewhere. It's going to be Dusty 2.0 all over again, but we're not on the receiving end this time, which is lovely. But we thought it would be worth doing its own video in relation to Harley Reid. He's obviously a household name, one of the young up-and-coming superstars of the competition, and there's obviously a lot of talk and speculation that he might be wanting to head back home to Victoria. And we just so happen to have some capital, some interest, and some money to be able to make this work. So in the media, it's been fairly well reported that Essendon are showing some interest. That level of interest on a more serious level, who knows? But what we do know, and this has come from Tiggs, from Grock, from Cam Hicks and his closest source, who nailed a lot of stuff last year, draft-wise, and about Dan Houston coming back home all the way back in March or April, I think he had it. So this is from people who've got some pretty good connections along the journey, that they all still believe that Richmond are definitely in the market for Harley Reid, as most clubs should be. I'd be disappointed if we weren't, to be honest. And we would be happy to strike now if the opportunity arises. We've got plenty of money in the bank, we know that, and we'll be looking to back end the contracts. Now, I'm not entirely sure on the whys or what that would allow us to do. All I know is that Blair Hartley is very, very good in this space, and whatever he decides to do, if this is something to eventuate, you would back him in 100% of the time, because he's got a great track record with the way our contracts have worked to be able to smooth money over and things like that. We tick a lot of boxes for West Coast in terms of draft capital. And that's been something the supporters have even acknowledged as well, that if you were looking for potential suitors, that we'd actually be high up on the list. I know Essendon do have 2 first-round picks as well, but they're also at a different stage of development. Maybe they're on the decline and then have to try and build their way back up, and they might be looking at a rebuild during the Tassie phase. There's a whole raft of things that might alter the way they think versus how we think, which is interesting. And I suppose ultimately that Richmond want to pair Harley Reid and Sam Lawler because they view it as a generational caliber midfield, which it is on paper. It absolutely is. If you could imagine them two running around together, causing absolute chaos, would be just pandemonium, and it'd be something to behold, I think. But Harley Reid, drafted the #1 pick in the 2023 national draft. He's had 22 games and 11 goals so far. He's contracted till the end of 2026, so that's obviously one of the big sticking points. In 2024, he averaged 18.5 disposals, 4 tackles, 3 inside 50s, and 5 clearances per game, which isn't too shabby at all for your first year in the big time, especially when you sort of thrust into the thick of it. I thought he held himself really well. The Harley Reid we've seen so far in 2025, look, it's definitely been a little bit more underwhelming than what he was in 2024, and there might be a lot of reasons for that. We saw it ourselves firsthand last year with Bolton and Baker, sort of seemingly checked out, or their mind wasn't totally on the job at hand for us because they were, a lot was weighing on their mind. Maybe the same thing's happening with Harley Reid. He's obviously a lot younger than those 2 guys that we had as well. Could be a little bit more tricky to handle. But yeah, we haven't probably seen the best of Harley Reid in 2025. So a lot of this is based on potential and what we all think he's going to get to. But there's no denying that when he was drafted, he was definitely deemed a generational talent, and for good reason. So how does it look? How does it work? Is it worth doing? And what are some pros and cons that could be of benefits for the Tigers? So let's take a look at some of that. Before we get into some of the nitty gritty, make sure you like and subscribe for more Richmond content. We're heading towards 2,500 subscribers. So make sure you get right behind us. We appreciate all the love and support. So looking at the nitty gritty of how this might work. Now, as I said, he's contracted till 2026. So the question for West Coast becomes, if they believe that Harley Reid does want to come back to Victoria, if they think that's a genuine chance, are they better off doing this now while he's still got extra currency available being contracted? Or do they try and keep him there for another year, see what happens and back themselves in to try and convince him to stay? You can understand why you would try either one of those options, but we've kind of seen firsthand in the year just gone that by not pushing the issue, but by being open to the trade, e.g. Baker and or Rioli and Bolton, should I say, that you do demand overs. Clubs have to pay more than what they would on an open market if they're still a contracted player. That's just how it is. Clubs paid overs to us for those 2 players, and in this example, we would have to pay overs to get someone like Harley Reid. So there's no way of getting around that. So I do think it would be in West Coast's best interest to pull the trigger this year if they firmly believe that he's going to be looking to come home, because they'll be able to maximise the draft capital they can obtain from this. So that's the first piece. What do we have that we can offer West Coast? So this is where I think we become one of the better suitors for them. And this is probably the part that's going to divide a lot of Richmond supporters as to whether it's worth it or not. And that's the discussion, I guess. We obviously have 2 first-round picks for 2025. We've got our own first-round pick, which in all likelihood will be anywhere between pick 1 and 3, most likely between 1 and 2 even, if you want to narrow it down further. And we've obviously got North Melbourne's first-round pick, which could be anywhere between pick 7 and 11, maybe even higher with 5 or 6 potentially. Obviously a lot to play out there, but let's say between 7 and 11 for the sake of this exercise. So you've got those 2 picks for 2025. Now, we also need to keep in mind that the rules of trading have changed this year, and you can now trade 2 years into the future. So previously, we would only be able to trade a 2025 pick and a 2026 pick. Now we can trade a 25, a 26, or a 27 pick, which really opens up a lot of opportunities and really makes things a lot more interesting to make trades like this happen. So then the question shifts to, well, what kind of players could be available to us at the national draft this year with the picks we may go to the draft with, i.e. pick 1 and 2, or pick 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11, somewhere in that range. There's obviously Sharp and Rodriguez, the two big names that we would be looking to draft. Rodriguez, a really zippy midfielder who I think would actually complete a lot of our midfield with some of the things that we lack that we're missing in terms of pace and especially around stoppage. He would actually address that issue. And Sharp's just a ball magnet who uses it really, really well and will probably be top 2 regardless. So that's what we're kind of looking at. Will one of them slide to that 7 or 11 pick? Maybe, maybe not. So let's say one of them's available at 1 or 2, and then it might be a different player type at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. But that's kind of what we're dealing with. So is it worth doing? So in terms of how the midfield would look, potentially, we could have Lawler, Smiley, Reid, Rodriguez, Houghton, Taranto, Hopper, Ross, which is pretty exciting, it must be said. Or it could be Lawler, Smiley, Rodriguez, Sharp, Houghton, Taranto, Hopper, Ross. So do you either add in 2 youngsters, or do you go 1 youngster, try and get Reid, and just sort of mash them all together? It's going to be a very divisive topic for Richmond supporters, because what Reid will cost is going to be very, very interesting. Now, as I said before, whoever goes after him, whether it's us, Essendon, whoever it might be, are going to have to pay big overs. But what does big overs look like? Some people have floated the idea of 3 first-rounders. Now, personally, I'd almost have to walk away from that at 3 first-rounders, and I'm not at all saying he's not worth it. I'm just saying with the highest value of those first-rounders that we have at the moment could be worth a bit to us long run. But the problem is, Harley Reid, despite not having a great 2025 so far, in a lot of ways is a much more known quantity than some of these draftees, despite not being that much older than them. So you kind of, it's a little bit of risk versus reward in that sense. Or if you're going to do 3 first-rounders, maybe you would do 1 from 25, 1 from 26, and 1 from 27. So what you're actually doing there, you're still keeping one of our draft picks for 2025. Ideally, you'd want to be keeping our one because it's probably going to be higher than the North one. And then for 2026 and 2027, even though you're giving up a first rounder in both of those years, you're kind of betting on yourself a little bit to get better, to not have it be such a high pick. So that's a little bit of risk versus reward from the club's perspective. Do you back yourself in to improve, to win more games, so that pick only turns out to be a 9, 10, or 11 rather than a 1, 2, or a 3? And we obviously don't know that until that plays out. But that's the thinking you got to put behind it. So you can't look at 26 and 27 and assume it's going to be we're handing over 3 pick 1s, because that might not be the case. It also might be the case. We just don't know. But then is it worth Harley Reid being in our team for that risk? The other option could be, instead of 3 first-round picks, which I don't think a lot of people would want to do, to be honest, could a player be involved in an exchange with West Coast? Now, I don't think this will be a popular idea, but I'm just throwing it out there as a hypothetical. On the mid-season draft of last year, right before we took Jacob Blight, Freo and West Coast had heavy interest in him, and they were pretty pissed off that we took him. Not at us, but just at themselves, or just in general, because he was gone. He's a WA boy. Now, Eagles also lost Barras, one of their main defenders. So Blight being a big-bodied key defender could actually suit a need for them. And being a WA boy, maybe there is a go-home element attached to him as well. I don't know. I don't know if he's wanting to do that. To be honest, I kind of get the vibes the other way, that he wants to reward us and thank us for taking the punt on him as a mid-age recruit. But that's probably another possibility. Does someone like Jacob Blight, is he of interest to West Coast? Could it be a first rounder, Blight, and maybe a swap of seconds or something like that? I'm not sure if West Coast would want to buy that or not. That's the other concern too, that what they want as well. So that's another angle. And then the third way it could happen, and this is the way I thought we would be the best chance of getting him up until today, when it's kind of almost been squashed. But it's been no secret that West Coast have been after Chad Warner. So Chad Warner would have been a really good offset of losing Harley Reid, which may mean they don't really want 3 first rounders. We might be able to involve Sydney and do a 3-way trade, so we only lose 2 first rounders along the way. But then today it comes out that Chad Warner is seemingly likely to re-sign for the Swans for 2 years or whatever it might be. So that kind of kills that one, and that may not happen. But if he doesn't sign, that would be my option number 1, I think. Option number 2 would be if there's a player of ours of interest for them. And like I said, Blight, I know, just come off a really good game, and I think we're all loving what he's doing. But then it's just that, would you rather Blight in the side or Harley Reid if push come to shove? Some may want Blight, some may want Reid. And just how much of a need would a defender be for West Coast? Also keeping in mind that we're probably at the moment got a few more excess defenders and big forwards. I know a couple of them are coming off injuries with Gibcus and Tyler Young and things like that. But maybe it's a position we can afford to lose one if we had to do something like that. But yeah, that is the conundrum. The Harley Reid conundrum. Is he worth pursuing for what it may cost us versus what he might get us into the future? Now, the other big question mark is, some people are going to say the timing's not right. We're still very early in our rebuild. And that's very true. We are very early in our rebuild, but Harley Reid's also very, very young himself. And what better way to help propel our rebuild forward than by putting him in a midfield with Lawler and Smiley and letting them grow together as a unit, and creating something extraordinarily special. I mean, you can't sit here and not tell me that that's not an exciting prospect. I think I don't think anyone could honestly say that doesn't appeal to them whatsoever. And then you maybe add in, like I said, a Rodriguez. You got Houghton. And it's just a chance for them to grow together. The other part that's also interesting is a lot of people will say, well, why would Harley Reid want to come to Richmond? They're bottom of the ladder, not winning many games, this, that, and the other. And, a lot of that's true. And in some ways, maybe that is the hardest sell, to try and convince him to pick us over someone else. But from the bits and pieces we've heard, and look, this part we don't know how true it is, so we're just taking it on, for what it's worth and how it was said to us, that according to the Reid camp, he's kind of wanting to look at club culture, proven winning history, having good mentality and good setups and things like that, rather than what the current ladder position looks like. So if that holds true, then that does give us some hope that we can be a chance in this race if he is gettable. And that's the big thing. He could turn around and sign for the Gold Coast, for West Coast tomorrow. But while that's not happening, and until that happens, you better believe that Richmond are up to it in their eyeballs. We might fly under the radar. We might not be named publicly much along the way in this, but rest assured that the guys that we know, that have people in the know, are well and truly confirming that we are in the hunt for him. And as we should be, and as every other club will be. So it's not like we're exclusive here. But keen to hear all of your thoughts in the comments below. Harley Reid, are you a yes? Are you a no? And are there caveats and stipulations on why you would be a yes and why you would be a no? Like, would you only do it if X, Y, and Z happened? Very keen to hear what you all think. This is going to be an interesting year. If he doesn't sign by mid-year, I think things will start to heat up quite a lot. But yeah, that is the video for today. Harley Reid, do we have a crack at him or not? Let us know what you think in the comments below.